Welcome back, everybody, to The Creative Moment, Season 2, Episode 4. I'm Dante Bullhauer. I'm a photographer.
Jamie Bullhauer. I'm a writer.
And we have this podcast talking about all things creative. We're both creatives, so we're talking about how it plays into our lives, all those different things. So today we are talking about the workflow, the work, kind of the day-to-day life, so to speak, as a creative, what it looks like to kind of go from start of a project to, the finished thing, and how all the different stuff that, maybe a client or a consumer doesn't see.
Oh, yes.
All the stuff that goes into that. So our crack open of the bubblers, that was pretty on sync there. And we'll get right into it. So working as a creative is, and I deal with this a lot just personally, not a lot of people know what actually goes into the finished product. Everybody sees the finished product, but not everybody knows, the brainstorming, all the different steps that it takes to get to that finished product. They just kind of take it at surface value. And so that's what we're diving into today. So why don't you go ahead and start us off with kind of what your workflow, what your process looks like to, whether it's a poem or a book. I'm sure there's different steps to both of those, but kind of what your generic work looks like with a project, that a creative project that you undertake.
And to a degree, and I think photography and stuff probably still has a bit of it, because I was helping a fellow poet with her work, just giving a little bit, some tweaks. And we started chatting that, the reader never knows if this poem is a kind of a one and done, which Langston Hughes admitted in his autobiography, The Big C, many of his poems were actually one and done. Or if I spent 3 days working with the rhyme scheme and the syllable count and kind of doing this with every line.
You restarted the poem twice.
They never know. They do not, as you had already mentioned. And in that sense, we were working together, just editing, which taking her poem, to the next step. And she's a digital artist also, and so she adds artwork with her poems. So she does kind of this double project thing. In most cases, I think that the workflow for writers, poets, and stuff like that has the workflow itself is you're inspired and or have an obligation. Okay. So you have obligations, you have jobs, but sometimes if I'm, working with a very short story, Twitter word that it's not an obligation. It's something I need and I want to do. So I read that word in the morning as I'm drinking coffee going, okay, waiting for the muse to hit or to work through, even if I don't get inspired. But other times, as we talked about keeping notebooks and stuff like that, inspiration hits. And when inspiration hits, you have to somehow at least get the idea down because it will go away. You can't ever remember all the time. So there is the inspiration aspect. And then from there comes a little bit of the work, even if it might be a poem or a blog post or whatever that is one and done. There is still a lot of mental work that gets involved, and using notepads or using my phone and sometimes reciting it onto Google Docs. And so you have to clearly, and I think this is an important part, is I have to clearly state from my mind or heart onto the paper so at least I understand. And sometimes we just want to jot down a line or something, but sometimes it's not enough. Mm-hmm. It's not enough, and in your case, that muse or that inspiration probably has two different looks, because you have your creativeness and you have obligations. So how do you, at that moment of muse/creation, what does photography actually kind of look like?
Yeah, so with it being, my full-time job, taking photos, taking videos, doing graphics, obviously not with anything, not every day I am inspired to do this, that, the other thing. But I still have deadlines. I still have things I need to accomplish. So whether I'm inspired or not, sometimes things just, they have to get done. And so a lot of the, I guess, original starting point of my work comes from other people, and it comes from other work, specifically graphic design. Before I create every single graphic, I will go on Pinterest or Twitter or something, scroll through graphics, see what I like, see what I don't like, see what I feel fits the theme of whatever I'm trying to create, and then I will start my work on said graphic, whatever. And so a lot of the time, having an idea in my head beforehand expedites the work, because then I don't have to think, that mental part that you talked about, where you have a new word every day, that the whole thought process starts over. If I know a week in advance I'm going to have to create this graphic for this person, I can start kind of getting the feel for what I want that to look like beforehand. And so the beginning of my work usually starts with looking at other creators, looking at other editing styles for photos, thinking about different video angles, different transitions that I want, different, compositions for photography. And then it starts, okay, here's what they did. Where can I put my own spin on it? Where can I put my creativity into this idea that this person had? And so that's kind of step two. I think, okay, what can I do to make this my edit for the photo, my graphic, my video? And so once I have that kind of put together, it really just kind of ends up I just have to do the work. I know what it's going to look like. I just have to change the colors, change the exposure. I have to put the edit together the way I want it. And so a lot of the work is mental.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long to write a tweet. It doesn't take long to, type out a blog post once you know what you're going to say. It doesn't take long. Editing a video does not take that long once I know kind of what I want it to feel like, look like, that sort of thing. And so 90% of the work in the creative industry is mental. And that's where sometimes you run into a problem, because people don't understand the value of the mental work. They see the end product and think, okay, I could change
I could do that.
Yeah, I could do that. I could just, press the button on the camera. I could record a podcast, whatever. But a lot of it is just in your head thinking, how do I fine tune this piece of work so that it does what I want it to do to the reader or the viewer? And I think that's where, I struggle with pricing and things, because not everybody understands the mental value of the work that we put out. And
yeah. And the mental part I'm going to come back to, because I think that's actually the first step of our workflow, but we'll get there in a second. Because you're doing the work. So in a sense, how do you know you're done? How do you know, when do you actually know you're done with the process?
I don't, because a lot of the time, and I've said this, I don't really like much of my work when I go back and look at it. Usually within 24 hours, I'll go back and say, oh, I could have done that. I could have done this better. Typically, in the moment, I'll feel okay, that looks good. That looks like a finished product. Export, whatever, send it off. I feel that I'm done in the moment, but then I'll go back and look at it and say, oh, I could have done this. I'll learn a new thing and say, oh, I could have applied it here. So when I'm done, kind of changes based on just, I guess I never really feel that I am done with a project. I always feel like I could do more. There is, finding that balance of putting your best foot forward and meeting the deadlines, and somewhere you have to meet in the middle. And so usually I put it right up to the line of the deadline, just trying to make it better and better. And then, right before it, I'll just end up delivering it. But it's a hard line to walk for me, of knowing when that project is done, when it's kind of complete? What does that look like? What does a
Well,
finished
and
product look
you
like?
have a deadline too, so you kind of, and your work shows your dedication and your art, and stuff. And actually thinking about that, I was listening to and I can't remember the podcast. It was about writing. It was about a certain poet that they had a poem that was different in 3 different books because they kept reworking it. And to a degree, any creation could never truly be finished. If I'm using a poetic form, I kind of know it's done because I've met all the guidelines as best I can. And so it's like, okay, now the work that goes involved with that, those types of poems, like if I'm really working poetic forms or doing things, none of those are really one and done because I can't think in that style with a syllable count, rhyme scheme, internal rhymes, and I'm working. I'm mentally looking up, sometimes, okay, what the heck rhymes with orange? That's a joke because supposedly nothing rhymes with orange. Anyway, and I'm just like, okay, what can I do? But still match the goal or the theme I have of the poem. And so sometimes it might seem like, if I have a very short story, sometimes I write a poem for that every once in a while. And Move Me Poetry has a poetic kind of battle every week, and they give you a word. And, and so I have deadlines, but there's just a lot of construction on the page and redoing it and, along those lines. And then blog posts and stuff, I do hardly any of those are one and done. Mom usually will edit for me, try to get that on the page. And even now, as I look back on other blogs, I'm like, oh, there's a little, it's a small thing. And, it's, Stephen King, who I know you guys may be retired, like his wife edits his first 2 drafts. She reads his books like a couple times over, but he said that's who he trusts. And, so we're writing and stuff, you're always trying to edit. And yeah, to a degree, I sometimes wonder if poems are truly done, but I kind of let them go. After that, I don't come back to them because it's to a degree, it's more than again, okay, on to the next.
Yep. And I feel like I don't ever feel like something is done, but I guess when we feel just kind of as a creative that the story of whatever we're creating is told well enough to be conveyed, like that a consumer could look at it and get the general emotion, is like when I feel it is done enough, like I can hit export on this and it will deliver the feeling that I want it to deliver. And so again, that is a lot more mental work than it is physical. And, it is a fine line to walk of putting so much into something that you overstep the emotion, and it just feels like you're just kind of like shoving, like if you feel like, okay, they're literally telling me I'm supposed to be happy about this, I'm supposed to be mad reading this poem, like it kills it. And so it's, finding that balance of, okay, I can keep making this better, I can keep doing this, I can keep doing this, and then you go overboard versus not doing it enough. You have to find that balance of where is the story told in an adequate way where it doesn't go too much, too little. And it's a lot of just mental work. It's not, the physical work is just doing whatever it takes to do it, like putting the graphic together, editing the video, writing the story. But a lot of it is just kind of in our head. And there's a lot of, I kind of want to talk about kind of the conflict of, like if you don't think, this is good enough, or if you think, oh, I should take it this way, the internal just kind of controversy that you go through. Like I I'm putting together a graphic series right now for a football team, and I got done like 4 out of the 10 posters, and I went back the other morning and I looked at one of them, thought that was okay, and then I restarted the other 3 because I was like, this is not like, it's not a cohesive piece of work. I don't like, the emotion that these 3 convey. So I went and restarted 3 of them, which took a lot more. Like, if you think about it, I would have been 7 out of 10 done versus, starting back over at 1 out of 10 done. But just, taking pride in my work and knowing like I can do better than that sort of thing. And just mentally, there's always kind of, at least for me, that piece that's kind of like chomping at me like, okay, what if we did this? What if we went this way?
That's where I think the real first step in the workflow or the creative flow, whatever, is actually, and we've talked about this, is actually strengthening your skills. Studying, learning, reading. I've almost reached my 60 books in a year challenge again. So and I read all kinds of different things, but also studying the forms, in your case, watching videos, learning new tricks and stuff. And I think that first step in actually understanding your skills and your goals and improving on those allows you to do some of the mental work it does to be creative. This is a fine line there. Doesn't mean you can't be struck by the muse and have something, but I don't think you honestly can produce high quality things on a consistent basis if you don't learn. If you don't do step 1, which is read poetry, watch other people's graphics and videos, and build a network in your head and heart of a foundation that comes out when we are caught with the muse and we're doing our work, because then that gives us, because that's part of the conflict is you have all this knowledge and all the personal inspiration mixing together. And when you hold yourself up to high standard, it's just like, okay, how do I get there? But yet, we do have deadlines. We do have, even if there's small ones, like I have to use this word in a very short story today, because that's the day the word is. It's a motivational factor. And I'm not sure if we ever can feel 100%, confident because I've mentioned this before. I'll write something like, dang, that is good. Send it out into the world. Yeah, and it's great. And then there's something I just kind of threw together, like, okay, and everybody's like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing?
There's definitely some graphics videos that I kind of experiment. I try something I've never tried before, and I don't necessarily feel like I feel like if I did that 3 more times over, then that 3rd time, it would be a lot better, obviously. But
yeah.
With deadlines and things, I just put it out there. I try something new, and I don't feel like it's my best work, and it just kind of, it kind of blows up. People are going crazy over it, and I'm like, okay, well, that's wrong. That's off. I forgot to do that. This is bad. I didn't color grade that. I didn't put her above the smoke, whatever. And yet, like, people don't notice that sort of thing. And so, yeah, building that portfolio kind of just kind of bag of tricks in your mind, I feel is a great starting place. And if you're kind of feeling stuck, or that you're kind of producing the same old stuff, you're not really growing, like, take a look at other people's work and just kind of branch out onto things that you don't usually, like maybe artists that use a different poetic style, or if you do a lot of sports stuff, maybe look at some different like magazine illustrations or something like that. They can help you. Or
I was just saying, Neil Gaiman once said, just go live life so you have something to write about. Like, get out. We've already talked about traveling and stuff, but if you're feeling stuck and like you kept just repeating the same you got to do something.
Yeah.
And because I kind of love is like, I read a lot. It's a weird interview. I have it on YouTube saved. And he's like, I read a lot of good writers that don't have anything to say. And he's like, they're really but he's like, they don't have anything to say because it doesn't feel like they've done anything, like they've lived. And, like your Buffalo pictures that you had, like, just as you said,
it was a new experience. It was, I'd never done that before. And that was kind of more of a controlled wildlife experience. They were all like fenced in. And so like, I knew I was going to see wildlife, whereas like when I went to Colorado a couple of years ago, I didn't know if I was going to see anything. So I had to stay in my car, obviously, because I didn't want to die. But that kind of forced me to, think differently about, okay, I know I'm going to see these bison. So like, it's not just I finally see it. I got to snap just a picture to just get a photo because I don't want to miss it. I knew I was going to see them. How do I compose it? How do I park the car in a spot where I know that I'm going to get, a good angle? And it was like, I'd never photographed bison before. So getting, a different angle, I got one at like the bison turning its head so that you could see the horns. Whereas like if it was more of a profile, you could only you may not be able to see any, just based on the light and things like that. And so doing that sparked my creativity and sparked kind of a different thought process for me of photographing, wildlife, do that different thing. Yeah. And
so that's living, building, working on your skill set, but having a skill set so that you could still produce a photo that was pretty cool. And then you still, because even with your creative stuff, I know that you go through the editing, with Adobe and stuff and tweaking contrast and stuff like that. And so that's like the whole kind of little bit of a workflow idea captured, as I was thinking about that group of photos that you took, 2 weeks ago now?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, we kind of mentioned at the beginning in terms of so for me, my business, pricing is hard, value is kind of perceived. Do you feel like people aren't necessarily paying for me to just press the button on the camera and take their picture? They're paying for that portfolio of knowledge that I have. They're paying for that. They're essentially they're paying for the mental work of it. The physical, anybody could do, they could watch me step by step edit this graphic and do the exact same thing. They're paying for the mental part of it. So do you ever feel kind of, I guess, not like a need, but do you ever feel like that is not understood, not perceived really? Like you talk about the poems that you put a lot into, you're like, this is great, doesn't really do well. Do you kind of feel sometimes that as a society, we just don't understand kind of that creative?
Well, there's a real, on my side, and I've been worried about this a little bit. One, I don't do anything on my blogs to generate ads or anything like that. I have my books for sale on Amazon, but I also have the Kindle Unlimited. And I make 0.0001 a page that gets read, and financially and stuff. And then I'm spending a lot of time and energy and building community and stuff on Twitter, and in a sense, giving away my work for free. And lots of other people are too. It's not, and maybe in hopes of building connection and stuff, but when the time comes for what are my words really worth? All my books are kind of priced a little bit differently, depending on how long they are. What is the 20th anniversary edition of And I Never Told You has actually, more poems from that time of my writing. So that one is priced up a little bit. And people to generate sales, put books on sale for 99 cents or stuff. And no matter what a creative does, if they have, a painting or a drawing, or they, have t-shirts or stuff like that, that idea of how much you're worth and what you're trying to do financially as a goal is a hard thing. Because of teaching and stuff, I don't have to rely on my writing for income. And maybe that's why I have never really made a splash, because I'm not forced to live off of my writing, even though I try, I would love to do that. But raising a family and stuff, plays into that. So, I don't know. The pricing and what our mental expertise is really worth is hard.
Valuing yourself when, again, like we talked about, a lot of your clientele, your consumer sees 4 to 5%, if that, of the final. They see the final body of work and not all that it took to get there, is really difficult. And I would say most of us are probably somewhat humble-ish. It's hard to value yourself, your brain appropriately
into a financial number.
Yes.
To
where your time is worth X amount of dollars for this poem, this project. And so it's an interesting thing, and it's something that I've definitely learned a lot from over, just the past couple months of not, people don't see the mornings waking up at 5 a.m. just to get this done by the time I said it was going to get done. They don't see the struggle that I went through to edit this one photo just to get it.
They do not see
right.
The learning. They do not see how much of our heart, time, and effort goes into improving our craft. And they don't, sadly, I don't think they care. I don't think they care, because at the end of the day, our work and our creative things end up being the product. And in your case, this is your job. So it's a lot more intense for you. For me, it's hoping that somebody is moved. They read a blog post and is inspired, and I feel I've done that, without really any financial aspect, because my books get overall good reviews and things. But you especially, they're like this poster, or you got to produce this hype video, and it's got a hype.
I feel it is pressurized, because I feel like I look back on, I flip it, I'm like, if I spent, $400, whatever the number is, on this, if I'm going to spend that much, whatever it is, it's 2% of my income, it's 5%, it's 10%. It better be pretty good. It better do the job. I better feel like it was worth my money. And it is a hard thing to not necessarily make the consumer understand, but just to kind of keep in mind, because yes, a lot of the work is honestly done before the shoot ever starts. It's the years built up of learning. Okay, I can't pose them this way because they look weird doing this. I can't edit this photo because it was taken at 2 p.m., not 5 p.m. That's a lot of the stuff that goes into the shoot, goes into the edit, that happens way before you ever even think about that job, before you even ever get that job. It's just learning what works, what doesn't, what people like, what they don't, and that's just kind of hard to put, attach a price tag onto, and attach a X amount, a tangible thing onto an intangible product, I guess, an intangible, kind of piece of your mind.
Yeah. But that's what work is, to a degree. No matter what job it is, You're getting paid for your effort, your time, your creative thoughts, your work ethic. We just a normal kind of job, though you agree to the term. On the creative side, lots of the time you determine the price, and that's the part that is crazy because you do not want to undervalue yourself.
But you definitely don't want to overvalue and underdeliver.
Yes, no, because then that's your reputation.
Yep.
That's your creative side then being judged fairly, unfairly, whatever. If you don't hit the right balance there, then there's consequences, for that. And artists, painters, I can't imagine, because sometimes you read those articles like this abstract art sold for 2.5
taped onto a wall.
Yeah. And I'm just like, okay.
a red pixel, a single red pixel.
Oh, yes, with the NFTs.
Almost $1 million, $800,000. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I should price my stuff way higher. Like, I have tons of red pixels in every single one of my stuff.
Yeah.
But it is a fine line to walk. And the hard part, I think, is kind of sometimes your confidence kind of takes a blow when you have a lead, you want to do this deal, and you throw out the price tag and they're like, I don't know if it's like, they're basically like, they're not saying it, but your work is not valued to them as much as you thought that it was. And that's something that I've definitely learned to cope with and learn to kind of deal with. Like, okay, people like this, I really thought these sets of photos were really good, but nobody liked them, nobody bought them. It takes a hit. Like, nobody thought that this photo was worth buying, worth liking, retweeting, whatever.
But social media has amped what has always been. Like, social media makes things really quick, but anybody who started out at the beginning, reputation filters into the financial part. It does. Like, when I imagine if you continue on the project, the path that you're on, that when you're 30 years old and you say, this is how much it costs for me to do this, most people will be like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty good deal, and not this, that's
probably 25. You don't buy Nike because it's the most comfortable clothing all the time. 25% of that price is probably because it's simply Nike.
Yeah.
And so, building that reputation, like, especially in the wedding industry, a lot of the time you will hire the name as a part of the work. It's not just for the name. Obviously, it's not just for the work. But if you get a recommendation for someone, this person's really good, part of the price you're paying is the name, and behind that name is that storage of like that mental kind of log that you've kept of learning what works, learning what doesn't, seeing other people's work, that sort of thing. And that's just that's part of the value that you are paying for, and that you don't ever really see until you get kind of the final product and you understand that.
Yeah.
So we kind of went in depth there. That was the Creative Moment, Season 2, Episode 4. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, you can subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. There'll be links in the description. And we will see you guys in a couple weeks.